Hello everyone, this is Desocrates, and in this video we're going into the history of Marcus Crassus, one of the richest Romans to ever live and the man who defeated Spartacus. Marcus Licinius Crassus was a member of the genus Licinia family. He was the second of three sons born to the senator Publius Licinius Crassus. The eldest brother died before the Italic War. His younger brother and father were either killed or took their own lives in Rome. After his brother died and his wife was widowed, Crassus decided that he should marry the widow of his brother. After the Marian purges in Rome and the death of Gaius Marius, the surviving consul Lucius Cornelius Cinna imposed restrictions on the surviving Roman senators who had supported Sulla in his march on Rome. These restrictions forced Crassus to flee to Hispania, where he stayed from 87 to 84 BC. While there, he recruited 2,500 men from his father's clients who were settled in the area. Crassus used this army to extort money from the local cities to pay for his campaigns. Some even accused him of sacking a city. After Cinna's death in 84 BC, Crassus went to the Roman province of Africa and joined Metellus Pius, one of Sulla's closest allies. He did not stay long though due to disagreements with Metellus. He then sailed his army to Greece and joined Sulla, with whom he stood in a position of special honour. During the civil war, Crassus and another famous Roman, Pompey, fought a battle in the plain of Spoleto and killed around 3,000 of the men belonging to the leader of the Marian forces. They then attacked Carinus, a Marian commander. During the decisive battle outside Colline Gate, Crassus commanded the right flank of Sulla's army. After almost a day of fighting, the battle wasn't going well for Sulla. His own centre was being pushed back, but he got word from Crassus that he had completely crushed the enemy before him on the right flank. Crassus wanted to know if Sulla needed assistance. In response, Sulla told him to advance on the enemy's centre and used Crassus' victory to renew the resolve of his own troops. By the following morning, the battle was over and they emerged victorious, making Sulla the master of Rome, and Crassus' contribution put him into a key position. Crassus' next concern would be to rebuild the fortunes of his family, which had been confiscated during the Marian restrictions put on him and many other families. Sulla also put restrictions on the families who supported his enemy, in which the property of his victims was cheaply auctioned off. One of the people who gained the most from this was Crassus. Sulla's restrictions ensured that his supporters would regain their lost fortunes from the fortunes of his enemies who supported Marius or Cinna. These restrictions meant that their political enemies lost their fortunes, and their female relatives, notably the widows, were forbidden to marry, remarry or remain married. Crassus is said to have made part of his fortune from these restrictions. There was one man whose name was not initially on the list of those affected, but Crassus added his name and stole his wealth for himself. It is believed that Crassus had roughly the equivalent of 229 tons of gold. This was accounted for right before his Parthian expedition. A lot of Crassus' wealth came by fire and war, but some was acquired more the usual way in Rome, which was through slave trafficking, production from silver mines, and of course, as briefly mentioned, real estate purchases. Crassus did something smart, which was buying slaves who were architects and builders. Because of this, he bought houses that had burnt down because the owners would let them go at a much cheaper price. He managed to buy a very large part of Rome in this way. The first ever Roman fire brigade was actually created by Crassus. Fires were quite common in Rome, and Crassus took advantage of the fact that Rome didn't have a fire department by creating his own. It was 500 men strong, and they rushed to burning buildings at the first cry of alarm. Upon arriving at the scene of the fire, the firefighters did nothing at first, while Crassus offered to buy the burning building from the distressed property owner, of course at a very low price. After buying the property, he would put out the fire, rebuild them, and often rent out the properties to their original owners or sometimes new tenants. Crassus befriended one of the Festal virgins named Licinia, whose valued property he desired for himself. Yet when he was further on in years, he was accused of criminal intimacy with Licinia, which was forbidden with her being a Festal virgin. Licinia was also formally prosecuted because of these accusations. Crassus wished to get Licinia's villa in the suburbs at a low price. It was for this reason that he was forever hovering over her and paying his court to her, until he fell under suspicion. In a way, it was actually Crassus' greed that absolved him from the charge of corrupting the Festal virgin, and he was freed from all charges. He still would not let Licinia go until he had acquired her property though. Crassus' next concern was his political career, which as a wealthy man in Rome, a follower of Sulla, and a man who came from a line of consuls and praetors, his political future was pretty much assured. His only problem was that despite his military successes, he was outdone by Pompey the Great, one of Crassus' rivals. During the revolt of Spartacus, and after several legions had been defeated and their commanders killed in battle, Crassus offered to equip, train and lead new troops at his own expense. Crassus was sent into battle against Spartacus by the Senate. At first he had trouble in both anticipating Spartacus and in inspiring his army to strengthen their morale. When a segment of his army fled from battle, abandoning their weapons, Crassus revived the ancient practice of decimation, which is executing 1 out of every 10 men, with the victims selected by drawing lots. Plutarch reports that many things horrible and dreadful to see occurred during the infliction of punishment, which was witnessed by the rest of Crassus's army. Regardless of this, the troops' fighting spirit improved dramatically after this event, since Crassus had demonstrated that he was more dangerous to them than the enemy. After this, Spartacus retreated to the Britannum Peninsula in the southwest of Italy. Crassus tried to trap the slave armies by building a ditch and a rampart across the entire peninsula of Rhegium in Britannum, one side of the sea to the other side of the sea. Despite this remarkable act, Spartacus and part of his army still managed to break out. On the night of a heavy snowstorm, they sneaked through Crassus' lines and made a bridge of dirt and tree branches over the ditch, therefore escaping. When the Roman armies led by Pompey and Lucullus were recalled to Italy in support of Crassus, Spartacus decided to fight rather than himself being trapped between 3 armies. In this last battle, the Battle of the Salarius River, Crassus gained a decisive victory and captured 6,000 slaves alive. During the fighting, Spartacus tried to personally kill Crassus, slaughtering his way towards the general's position, but he only succeeded in killing 2 of the centurions guarding Crassus. Spartacus is believed to have been killed in the battle, although his body was never recovered. The 6,000 captured slaves were crucified along the Via Appia by Crassus' orders. At his command, their bodies were not taken down afterwards but remained rotting along Rome's main route to the south. This was intended to be a lesson to anyone who might think of rebelling against Rome in the future, mainly slaves going against their owners and masters, the Roman citizens. With this battle, Crassus effectively ended Spartacus' revolt. In Plutarch's account, Crassus had written to the Senate that they summoned Lucullus and Pompey, but that he was now sorry that he had done so and was eager to bring the war to a complete end before those generals came. Crassus knew that the success would be given to the one who came up with assistance and not to himself. Crassus decided to attack a splinter group of rebels, and after this the rest of the slave army withdrew to the mountains. Pompey had arrived from Hispania with his veterans and was sent to provide reinforcements. Because of this, Crassus hurried to seek the final battle, which he won. Pompey arrived in time to deal with the disorganized and defeated slaves, writing to the Senate that indeed Crassus had conquered the slaves, but that he himself had ended the war. Crassus, for all his self-approval, did not venture to ask for the major triumph, and it was thought dishonourable to even celebrate even the minor triumph on foot, nor did he wish to be honoured for subduing slaves. According to Plutarch, Pompey was asked to stand for the consulship. Crassus wanted to become his colleague and asked Pompey for his assistance. Pompey received his request gladly and eagerly accepted Crassus' offer. Once in office, they did not remain friendly and disagreed on almost every measure, making their consulship useless politically and without achievement. Crassus displayed his wealth by making public sacrifices to Hercules, entertaining people at 10,000 tables. During this spectacle, he also distributed enough grain to last 3 months to each family. These acts raised support amongst the population. During this time, both Pompey and Crassus refused to dismiss their armies that were stationed outside Rome, but Crassus did give in first when he offered to become Pompey's colleague. In 65 BC, Crassus was elected censor and during that decade was Julius Caesar's patron in all but name, financing Caesar's successful election to become Pontifex Maximus. Crassus also supported Caesar's efforts to win command of military campaigns. Caesar's mediation between Crassus and Pompey led to the creation of the first triumvirate in 60 BC, consisting of Crassus, Pompey and Caesar. Crassus received Syria as his province, which would have been an endless source of wealth if he had not also sought military glory in an attempt to conquer Parthia. Crassus not only attacked Parthia because of its great source of wealth, but also because of a desire to match the military victories of his 2 major rivals, Pompey and Caesar. The king of Armenia offered Crassus the aid of nearly 40,000 troops, 10,000 cataphracts and 30,000 infantry, on the condition that Crassus invade through Armenia so that the king could maintain the upkeep of his own troops, while also providing a safer route for his and Crassus' men. Crassus refused and instead chose the more direct route by crossing the Euphrates, as he had done in his successful campaign in the previous year. Crassus received directions from a local chieftain who had previously assisted Pompey in his eastern campaigns. This time though, the chieftain was being paid by the Parthians and urged Crassus to attack at once, falsely stating that the Parthians were weak and disorganised. He then led Crassus' army into a desolate desert far from any water. In 53 BC at the Battle of Carrhae, the legions of Crassus were defeated by a Parthian force that was smaller in number. Crassus' legions were primarily heavy infantry and were not prepared for the swift cavalry and arrow attacks in which the Parthian troops were trained. The Parthian horse archers devastated the Romans with hit and run tactics, faking retreats with their ability to shoot as well backwards as they could forwards. Crassus refused his questor Gaius Cassius Longinus' plans to reform the Roman battle line, instead staying in the Tuxedo formation in order to protect his flanks until the Parthians eventually ran out of arrows. However, the Parthians had stationed camels carrying arrows to allow their archers to continually reload and relentlessly barrage the Romans until dusk. Despite taking extreme casualties, the Romans managed to retreat but were forced to leave many wounded behind, later to be slaughtered by the Parthians. Crassus' men, being near mutiny, demanded that he parley with the Parthians, who had offered to meet with him. Crassus, in low spirits from the death of his son in battle, finally agreed to meet the Parthian general. However, when Crassus mounted a horse to ride to the Parthian camp, a junior officer suspected a Parthian trap and grabbed Crassus' horse, instigating a sudden fight with the Parthians that led the Roman party dead, including Crassus. A story later emerged that after Crassus' death, the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth in symbolic mockery of his thirst for wealth. Thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed, remember to subscribe as more videos will be coming out soon.